Okay, now use this as an example in my house on the ceiling where I see all this dark stuff coming through and it's variegated. Now it doesn't look good.
Right.
And if I mention it to my wife, she'll freak out and she'll say, "You got to paint it."
Yeah, right.
So I better keep my mouth shut. but if it's been painted a number of times.
Right.
Then the primer is not the issue. The primer is stain blocker.
Correct. You need stain blocker.
And after I do the stain blocker, then paint it with a good paint.
Right.
Rather than a cheap paint, because the good paint will do what versus a cheap paint?
Well, certain older, cheaper paints will do things like they'll fade. The color will fade on them. They will chalk. They get powdery. And on a ceiling,
powdery, then it flakes off. It just kind of dusts off.
On a ceiling, it's not that big an issue.
Okay.
Paint for ceiling is pretty standardized. It's pretty of all the paints, it's one of the less expensive of all the paints. Is the ceiling.
Because it knows it's not going to be knocked and scuffed and all that kind of stuff.
It's just flat white, and it's easy to make, and that's very inexpensive. Of all the paints, it's an inexpensive product. But on walls, if you have kids, you have a lot of high traffic areas. You want to be able to clean them up. You don't want them to mark up to begin with. And
for the kid, you're going to have them marked up in a week.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then what's going to happen if it's cheap?
If it's an expensive paint, a cheap paint, you can walk down the hallway of a freshly painted house and put your hand on the wall. Even if your hands are clean, the oil in your hands will cause a stain on that paint. And it will mark up so fast.
Well, then if that's the case, then you get a cheap paint job. It looked good when the guy left and the guy got a check. And how soon before it looks like it's old?
Depends how soon you touch it.
Which is going to be right away.
Yeah.
Almost.
Within 6 months or a year, it looks as bad or worse than when you painted it.
Well, then it becomes very expensive to get the cheap paint job.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you got to keep the hassle of it, and then you got to pay for it again.
That's exactly right. Paint it over.
Well, then how long should the paint job last if the guys, people are not scuffing it all, that they're, it's just normal wear and tear, but the people that are careful, let's say.
Well, a good quality paint that you would put
interior.
In the inside, good quality paint. If you're not gouging or anything, you're just normal wear and tear. A good quality paint that won't fade and won't chalk on you it'll last 10 years. I mean, it'll last a long time. It just depends on. Okay, if you're in a hallway, for instance, and you're the kind of person that washes the walls down once a month.
Well, that's not realistic.
That's not realistic.
Let's say once a year.
Let's say you wipe the walls down with just a wet rag once a year.
When there's a scuff and you think it needs to be cleaned.
Yeah,
Spring clean it, let's say.
Okay, you clean it, and that action of washing on an inexpensive paint takes paint with it, and a higher quality paint it won't. It won't bring wash paint off.
And we're talking about a water-based paint.
Water-based paint, yeah, water-based paint, and acrylic paint.
Okay, so then,
that's a big difference.
That is okay. So tell me this: